This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Africa. In the next hour, we'll be bringing you financial news making headlines around the world with a focus on economic developments right here on the continent. I'm Hannah Viviers in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, where it's 9 p.m. It's 2 p.m. in Washington, D.C. and 2 a.m. in Beijing. Wherever you're joining us from, welcome. First of all, let's take a look at how the markets fared today. Volatility was the order of the day on the markets. However, negative sentiment took the cup. The S&P 500 suffered a major blow from losses in giant energy producers ExxonMobil and Chevron, which posted the worst losses in decades. The S&P was down more than 0.3% today. The FTSE 100 faring no better. It lost a little over 1.2%. Coming to the continent, South Africa's JSE shaved off 0.3%, losing some of those gains it had made earlier on this week. Let's take a look at more stories making headlines. Security forces locked down major cities in Zimbabwe to prevent protests over economic hardships. COVID-19 pandemic slows oil production in South Sudan. And the Eurozone's economy records its deepest contraction in Q2. We begin the hour tonight in Zimbabwe, where businesses have been forced to close as security forces sought to stifle anti-government protests called by activists. Recent weeks have seen rising tensions in Zimbabwe as the economy implodes. Zimbabwe is suffering its worst economic crisis in more than a decade. It is marked by inflation running above 700%, a local currency that is rapidly depreciating against the US dollar, and acute foreign exchange shortages. The World Food Programme also projects that the number of Zimbabweans facing food insecurity could reach 8.6 million people by the end of the year. That would be a staggering 60% of the country's population. Well, we're staying with that story, and joining us now for more on that, we have our correspondent Farai Makutuya, who is in Zimbabwe's capital, Harare, for us. Thank you so much for joining us, Farai. Farai, what's the latest on this story?
Well, Hannah, as you quite rightly say, there was a heavy security presence in Harare as well as elsewhere across the country, basically to prevent people from accessing the CBD, but also to make sure that there was no congregation or people gathering to mount these protests that had been called in recent weeks. And so when we went around the streets of Harare Central Business District, they were virtually deserted. No one on those streets, none of the businesses were opened. And even in some of the residential areas, activity was very subdued. Traffic was very subdued. A few neighborhood shops were open, but basically most people heeding the call and perhaps given the warnings that had been issued by the security sector, by the government, by the president himself, a number of people taking heed and staying at home and actually not making any attempt to go about their normal business today.
Farai, you and I spoke just this week about some of the great positives that were coming through in the Zimbabwean economy, and yet it seems as though despite some of those developments, for the majority of people in Zimbabwe, life just got a whole lot tougher. Paint for us a picture, Farai, of what the real situation is for the majority of people there.
Well, Hannah, indeed, we did speak about mining sector. We spoke about some of the efforts to try and sort out the parallel forex market and to bring down inflation. I think those sort of initiatives, those efforts will reap dividends in the long term. But in the short term, in the immediate term, what a lot of people are facing are eroded incomes because of inflation, because of the depreciating currency. People's wages aren't enough for them to pay or to meet their basic needs and basic costs, to send their children to school, to put enough food on the table. The cost of living is going up. We know that basic services, water provision, for instance, in some areas is very poor. There are shortages of cash in the bank, and so people still need to queue for cash to get cash in their banks. So there are a number of challenges, day-to-day challenges that people are facing when they try and access medical care, We know nurses and doctors are not working at full capacity, but also just the cost of accessing those drugs and accessing the medical attention and care that they require is beyond the reach of many. The lockdown has only made things worse. I remember, speaking to someone who was a taxi driver who hasn't been able to operate under the lockdown, and he's saying he's now having to sell off some of his property just to make ends meet and to feed his table, to feed his family. A number of people have relocated back to the rural homes because they can't just cope. They can't pay for rentals. They can't pay and meet the expenses of living in the city. And so that is the immediate challenge. That is the reality that a number of Zimbabweans are facing today.
Such a bleak picture for Rai, but these protests can be seen as people believing that the government can do something to ease their suffering. What are some of the tools that are available to government that could perhaps alleviate some of the tremendous pressure that the majority of Zimbabweans are experiencing?
Well, certainly, I think people pointing out that there are things within government's means. For instance, corruption. The government itself, as well as the general population, acknowledge that it has hemorrhaged the economy in the past and continues to be a thorn in the flesh. It continues, to hamper economic development. And so people say that there is a lot of talk to try and tackle corruption, but not enough action. And so I think if government could take sterner steps and go after some convictions and probably some of the bigger names or big fish and higher ranking officials, then I think Zimbabweans will have a certain level of satisfaction, or at least feeling that there is attention being paid to the challenges that they are facing. Issues to do with inflation, issues to do with eroded incomes and the depreciating currency, issues to do with availability of cash in the banks. That is something that government can also do and is working towards with some of the efforts we've seen them introduce on the currency front. Hopefully they will start to pay dividends quite soon. Inflation, over 700% now. If it can start to come down and prices stop rising, I think again is something that government can quickly do. A lot of people also say that if government can prioritize social service expenditure and stop spending money on luxuries, vehicles, those sort of things, cut back on that sort of expenditure and invest in hospitals, in drugs, in education. I think those are also things that will give people a sense of security, will enhance social welfare, and make sure that those who are vulnerable have some sort of safety net that is available to them, and will also generate this goodwill for government that is, people would really like to give them now, but are unable to because of the challenges that they're facing.
Farai, thank you so much for joining us. Farai Mwakutia joining us live from Harare, Zimbabwe. Well, let's just focus now to the aviation sector. Kenya has excluded the U.S. and major European nations from a list of countries whose nations will be allowed in when international flights resume this weekend. A protocol guiding the resumption of international flights only has Canada, Switzerland, Japan, China, and South Korea outside of Africa and the list of 11 countries whose citizens will initially be allowed into Kenya. Authorities developed the list based on the intensity of coronavirus cases in specific countries. Passengers to Kenya will be required to have COVID-19 negative certificates, and their body temperature cannot exceed 37 degrees Celsius. In the meantime, COVID-19 has hit hard. Advertisers with traditional advertising spots becoming the major casualties. CGTN's Leon Sayanga now explores how advertising is starting to recover in Uganda as the country eases its lockdown restrictions.
A local newspaper editor picks through the month's printed papers. The past 4 months of the coronavirus lockdown have been the worst ever for this publication. A decline in advertising revenues and newspaper circulation amid the pandemic forced the paper to scale back on production.
The companies that were advertising stopped advertising because people are not working. So whom were they advertising to? And what products were they trying to put on the market? So all those things affected us. And the biggest business person in Uganda is government. Government also for some time stopped advertising.
Media organizations rely on local advertisers like telecoms, banking and beverage companies as their primary revenue source. They generate close to $100 million in advertising expenditure at least every year. Despite the current dip, it's a period many hope to recover from.
There's traffic flow, there'll be more eyeballs and stuff like that, so the rates probably will go to where they were. Or if not, the rates will be almost where they were. So I think for the out-of-home business, I think business will still come back to a significant normal. But I think where things might be tough is mainly on print, the newspapers, the magazines and stuff like that.
Uganda has been easing restrictions that have allowed businesses to resume operation, creating an opportunity for spending on advertisements to increase. Local advertising agencies say there will be more business as the country opens up. But the pandemic is likely to change the advertising industry, with companies opting for inexpensive and innovative ways to spend their money. The majority of the traditional media share of advertising is done on radio and television. Print media falls further back. The pandemic, however, has forced both agencies and their clients to rethink.
We are seeing most clients now playing in the digital space more. They are spending a lot on digital. Also, during this time, we've seen that the viewership of TV has actually gone up because guys are at home. So we've seen clients who traditionally are not on TV jumping on TV and doing animated TV to pass their message.
Uganda's television usage rose to 34% within the last 10 years and internet usage to 9% in 5 years, according to a National Information Technology survey. And with Ugandans now returning to work, access to the internet is also increasing. These are spaces advertisers are likely to focus on more in the future. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Time now for your company news. Portuguese automotive giant Salvador Citano has invested about $3 million into its car business in the Kenyan market. The company, which offers distribution, retail, and after-sale vehicle services for various Hyundai and Renault products, plans to provide high-end services in its automotive workshop. The workshop will also provide showroom facilities for prospective Renault and Hyundai customers. State monopoly Ethio Telecom saw a 31.4% rise in revenues in the 12 months to end June 2020. The firm attributes a jump to an expansion of the network as well as more customers. Ethiopia has said it plans to sell 40% of shares in Ethio Telecom, with the government retaining a majority stake. The liberalization of the telecom sector is part of a wider economic reform planned by the Prime Minister. Elsewhere, British broadband and mobile operator BT Group has announced the appointment of Rob Shutter as CEO of its enterprise unit and a member of its executive committee. Shutter is currently group president and CEO at MTN Group. During his tenure, he has helped MTN navigate major regulatory challenges, especially in Nigeria, and returned the mobile operator to growth. And finally, American plane maker Boeing lost 2.4% in the second quarter compared to a net loss of about $2.9 billion during the same period last year. In the 3 months period in June, revenue fell by 25% to $11.81 billion from $15.75. Boeing also ended the second quarter with $32 million in cash and marketable securities. It recently secured $25 billion in additional financing and had $61 billion in debt at the end of the period, up from $39 billion at the end of March. And that was your corporate news headlines. Well, let's now take a short break and return. More news, including COVID-19 pandemic slows oil production in South Sudan.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairobi. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
My family has been doing this artwork for the past 600 years.
My dream is to be the leading player in Africa in spice sector.
Nobody in the region consumes it. Even me cannot afford the vanilla cooking.
What we've created here is the elegance, the color, the celebration of life.
Well, South Sudan is just emerging from a decades-long civil war. Early this year, the country was expected to focus on the economy by increasing its crude oil production. But the coronavirus pandemic that hit the country soon after the peace deal has derailed all plans and dashed the hopes of economic revival. The world's youngest nation's oil production has dipped by 20,000 barrels per day due to the pandemic. It also had to postpone scheduled bidding and licensing of 14 oil blocks. Since the economy in the country largely banks upon the sale and production of oil, its reduction has brought a significant loss to the government. The country is now revising its plans to develop the oil sector in the post-COVID-19 world. We're for more on that story live from Juba. Here is CGTN's Patrick Oyet. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. Patrick, it's a double whammy for South Sudan. Much of the country's revenue, we know, comes from oil, with a significant cut in oil production. And then added to that, the price of oil itself has not been doing very well, and it's at record lows. What is the real impact, Patrick, of what's happening in South Sudan right now with this cut in oil production that's coming through now?
Anna, there is a very serious impact of this on South Sudan's economy, as you rightly said. For example, 98% of South Sudan's budget is funded by oil money. So you can imagine reduction in production and also, of course, reduction in the price at the global level. What it means here? It means simply the government does not have money. That therefore means here we are not seeing public investment. We are not seeing a lot of investment on roads. We are not seeing investment in hospitals. So that is already a problem. And then, in addition to that, the South Sudan's government is the largest employer in the country, according to the World Bank report. Now, we have also seen now people going for months, civil servants without salaries. That is also a very big challenge. And in the recent few days, in the recent 1 week or so, we've seen the South Sudanese pounds depreciating against the dollar, and that means prices of commodities in the market are very expensive. So many people are not able now to afford those commodities. Not only that, we're also not seeing any foreign direct investment in the country because of this instability. The country is just returning from war, as you rightly said. And of course, you cannot actually have any proper economy growing if you do not actually bring peace to the country. And that is also being affected by the fall in global oil price and reduction in production, because one, this is a huge government that has been brought in place because of the peace deal. You are expected to have 550 members of parliament, you have 5 vice presidents, you have 35 ministers, you have 10 state governors, you have deputy governors, parliaments in all the 10 states. So you have a huge government that you need money actually to maintain, and now money is not there, so the economy is not doing well.
Patrick, you talked about the commodities and how at the moment, just because of what people are going through and there's hardships, that it's difficult for them to get these commodities. I wanted to talk a little bit about supply, because we do know that with anti-COVID measures, there had been restrictions just in terms of how much goods are moving around. Just speak to us about what impact that has had on commodity prices in the country.
First of all, it has made the commodity prices to go very high. Why? Because one, South Sudan imports almost everything from needle to food stuff to anything you can imagine. Most of the food stuff, of course, come from the neighboring countries of Uganda, Kenya, Sudan, and these has also been affected because of the delay on the way at the border points to be checked for coronavirus and things like that. So there has been delay. Therefore, the supplies that is coming in little quantity, and the demand is very high. Therefore, you see the prices going up. Not only that, the fact that also the local currency is depreciating against the dollar means prices are also going up, because the business people themselves, you have to actually charge amount of money that you will be able to change that money into dollars to go across the border to purchase more goods to bring. So the prices have also gone up because of that. Another thing is that some goods are also not coming. For example, when you look at electronics, and if you look at, for example, clothes, shoes, these goods are hardly coming into the country because most of them are exported, are imported either from China or from Turkey, and getting transportation from those countries to bring the goods to South Sudan is just a challenge. So most of the traders, most of the business people are just, now maintaining their stock and charging as high as possible to make sure that they don't run into losses, because the dollar rate just is not favorable. The local currency keeps depreciating every time. So when you're charging people, you have to charge thinking that tomorrow it might not be the same. So prices are rising because of such factors. Of course, because of measures brought in place to contain the spread of COVID-19. Hannah.
Patrick, I would imagine, though, that, South Sudan has already been facing a huge crisis when it comes to Forex, right? And that there's been a shortage of Forex in the country. So when you talk about foreign direct investment, kind of like really plummeting because of all these measures. And then now we have the added issue of these exports, of these oil exports, which is more than 96, I think 98% of South Sudan's exports, which has just been hit so hard. So that would again really hit Forex in the country. So when you talk about just the availability of Forex, what is government saying they are doing or what they're planning to do just to tackle that issue of bringing foreign currency into the country? Because it sounds very much like even the people that are trading, like you say, need these Forex to be able to trade across borders.
Yeah, that's where the government is facing a lot of challenges. The governor of central bank said they are doing all that they can, because the problem with South Sudan is that they do not have actually a serious reserve because of the long years of war. And the governor had been saying that they were looking for finances to ensure that they start having reserve in terms of gold. They buy gold and keep so that they have some reserve. They would also, the government has been talking of looking for friends or donors, international donors, to help South Sudan. But this is coming at a very difficult time, because you see every economy almost is suffering from the same problem of COVID-19. So before somebody gives you money, that person herself or himself has to put first his house or house in order. So that's a challenge the government is facing. But what we are likely to see, according to many economists here, is that the government is likely to borrow money against the oil, which is not yet produced, so that they are able to at least push the peace process forward, ensure the economy does not collapse. So getting Forex, as you said, is extremely difficult. If you look at the rate, that the official government rate, and you compare to the black market rate, the parallel market, it is double, almost going to triple what the official rate is. The black market is a totally different thing, and you cannot get at the official rate when you go to the forex bureaus, when you go to the banks, you cannot get. So you have to, in a way, get them from the parallel market, and that is the challenge.
When you're talking about that, it just sounds though the South Sudan's debt is just going to increase exponentially. But Patrick, let's talk a little bit about the coronavirus and what South Sudan is doing just in terms of tackling that on a health level for the people with all these challenges that you've stated. Now, it's taking a lot of countries putting a lot of money just to be able to put these measures in place, to be able to ensure that people, you know, are able to fight this crisis. With all the challenges that you've mentioned now, Patrick, how does the country plan to be able to fight this virus effectively?
That is also a very big challenge. However, when it comes to the issue of fighting COVID-19, there is a lot of help that the government is getting. For example, the WHO, World Health Organization, is helping. They have been supporting the South Sudan's Ministry of Health. They have set up accommodation. They are also helping in terms of providing medicine, stocking those hospitals, working alongside South Sudan's government. That is happening. Also, we've seen a lot of donations from China. Chinese government has donated about 6 consignments so far to South Sudan to fight COVID-19, from protective gears to medicine that could help. And we've also seen of late donation from Chinese business community still coming in to help the hospitals in terms of food, to help the staff. We've also now seen donations coming from the European Union also to help in the fight against COVID-19. Some of those donations are medicines, protective gears like face masks and so forth. They are going to non-governmental organizations that work in the line of health. So the donations are being spread across the country. So in that regard, because of the help from the international donors, from friends of South Sudan, at least something is happening. We are seeing also daily reports being released on, you know, COVID-19, and the government. We've also seen donation from the US. They have actually donated a plane to be collecting samples from the states to bring to South Sudan's capital, Juba, so that tests are conducted and the magnitude of the virus is properly ascertained. So in that regard, something is being done because of the help from the international donors. Where the challenge is on the economy, where they need money to pay staff, they need money to, for example, carry out training of the huge number of troops that are from different armed groups, to ensure civil servants are paid, to ensure households have something to they can afford something. This is where the challenge is.
Patrick, thank you so much. A dire situation, but always good speaking to you, Patrick. Thank you for your comprehensive reporting on this. Patrick Oyet joining us live from Juba, South Sudan. Well, Egypt has extended the operating hours of cafes and restaurants by an extra 2 hours to midnight, but they must still operate at 50% capacity. The North African nation had reduced operating hours in its initial reopening phase to limit public gatherings and curb the spread of the coronavirus.
The Sou'i and Soda has been one of the fastest growing restaurants in Egypt. In 2019 alone, the 3-year-old domestic brand jumped from 5 to 12 branches. This year should have witnessed a spike in revenues. Instead, it has been curtailed by the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The full lockdown took place on March 25th. On March 26th, our sales were zero. We then saw a gradual increase. By April, we averaged 6% of our usual sales. In May, we reached 18%, and by June, it became 28%. If the core of our business was fast food, home delivery would represent 40 to 60% of the core sales. But the normal delivery percentage in the Southward dining sales is 14%.
Officially, 700,000 Egyptians work in cafes and restaurants. Experts estimate that figure to reach 2 million when informal labor is included. To ease the economic impact on this sector, the government increased their working hours from 10 in the evening to midnight, while maintaining a 50% restriction for occupancies.
I don't think these 2 extra hours will make a big difference in sales because the consumer behavior has changed. The lifestyle has changed. We used to start seeing flow of customers at 6 p.m. Now it's from 2. To bring the economy back to normal, life must go back to normal. Having regular working hours will reflect on when people will need a break or come to restaurants.
Going back to near normal operation hours will benefit employees whose salaries have been cut during the past months. Their income won't be the same though, as tips and bonuses are far lower than their norm. And while the impact of COVID-19 lasts, business owners have been trying to look for creative ways to keep their restaurants afloat.
We opened seasonal branches. We went to the North Coast to open a branch for a few months to generate revenues and make use of our staff's workforce. The secret to success this year is to cut costs and to survive with our brand names. If this year ends rationally, I think in best cases, restaurants might lose 10 to 20% of their market value.
Investments in Egyptian cafes and restaurants were worth $13.5 billion in 2017.
The government restrictions are gradually getting lifted, but restaurants know it's going to be a long process for a full recovery. And the concern now is not about making profit, it's about surviving that period. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, moving to West Africa now, many sectors in Ghana have suffered as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. The property market is among the hardest hit. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rafai now reports on how developers are hoping the internet can help them turn things around.
Stephen Deborah Ablomete's real estate business was hit hard when Ghana was locked down in March. The restrictions meant he couldn't carry out viewings as normal.
We were unable to have interaction with our clients, so we have to find other means to reach out to them and to make sure business is as usual. So basically, yes, the panic was real.
Stephen has now taken his business online, showcasing his homes to potential buyers through virtual tours. Ghana has eased restrictions, meaning viewing of homes is possible in person under strict adherence to COVID-19 safety measures. But Stephen says he's still seeing an increase in interest in online viewing. Estate developers say potential buyers of these houses now prefer to connect online instead of walking in to assess the property. And despite the challenges posed by COVID-19, they are seeing a recent increase in demand. And it's not just developers changing their ways. On construction sites where the houses are being built, protocols are being adopted to reduce the spread of COVID-19.
Instead of getting several masons and carpenters and laborers at one spot, in this bodily contact and, what COVID doesn't like, for example, you can put them into component development where you can have parts of the thing done somewhere under a controlled environment and then brought onto the site and assembled.
Some developers, like Stephen, have made other changes too, offering people extended payment plans.
In the past, every developer wanted to do outright payment. If somebody is buying a house, you say, pay me outrightly. But COVID has taught us that people don't have money, so you need to come up with some great payment plan. I know developers who are doing 5 years, some are doing 4 years, myself I'm doing 24 months, in terms of payment plan for people to be able to buy these properties.
Ghana's real estate industry was booming before the global pandemic. As the lockdown lifts and the economy tries to recover, developers like Stephen are hoping they can go back to that growth via the internet. Nabil Ahmed Rafai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Meanwhile, the COVID-19 crisis has upended vehicle sales and has left car dealers in Africa struggling to offload their stock. In Tunisia, car importers and dealers say the health crisis and the general lockdown has devastated the sector as they have lost more than 90% of their usual sales and activity. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shuwashi with more details.
Bassem Loukil is the founder and CEO of Loukil Group. It is one of the leading car importers in Tunisia and North Africa. He says that sales have stopped for almost 10 weeks. Consequently, stocks in some car segments are very low because the supply chain was abruptly broken during the months of March, April and May. Lukil says that access to credit is extremely limited while the cost is really high.
Today, in order to really pull this segment of the economy out of its crisis and stagnation, we really need to look at some special measures. One, to help consumers fight the price increases, and that will be by reducing or eliminating the 15% consumer tax. Why not revising the VAT from 19.3% to maybe 12% in order to compensate the increase in price due to the devaluation of the Tunisian dinar.
Most European manufacturers make and buy their car components in Tunisia. This vital industry, which employs more than 63,000 people, has also been greatly affected by the coronavirus crisis.
Our exports of car parts to Europe total 1 billion euros per year. And therefore, in order to maintain that growth and maintain that exchange with the European car manufacturers, we also need to look at how we can entice sales and maintain at least a minimum of 42 or 40,000 new car sales per year.
The president of the National Union for the Import and Sale of Cars in the North African nation says that if the crisis persists, the whole industry could be devastated in the next few months.
The COVID-19 crisis has devastated the automotive sector. The sales are the lowest in decades. Only 118 cars were sold in May for all car importers. We've lost over 90% of our activity. This is unprecedented.
Tunisian car importers are calling on the ministries of trade and finance to give incentives to car dealers in order to preserve existing jobs and to limit the impact of the coronavirus crisis. Experts assert that with fewer people likely traveling over the summer vacation period due to the pandemic, as well as the low purchasing power due to the economic crisis, car sales could slump even further if the state does not support car importers and consumers. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
It's time now for us to take a short break and return. More news, including the Eurozone's economy records its deepest contraction in Q2. And the Chinese president launches the BeiDou 3 satellite system.
No one again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces towards the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, Let's now recap on news making headlines this hour. Africa has recorded over 900,000 COVID-19 cases. Over 500,000 people on the continent have recovered from the disease. The continent's death toll stands at over 19,000. The World Health Organization and the Africa Center for Disease Control have urged African governments to do more to protect health workers fighting COVID-19. More than 10,000 medical personnel in 40 countries have contracted the coronavirus so far. Businesses in Zimbabwe's capital, Harare, remain closed as the government deployed soldiers and the police ahead of planned protests. Businesses and shops in the country's second biggest city, Bulawayo, were also closed with few cars on the road. Security forces were on high alert after activists called for rallies across the country to address these issues of corruption and economic hardship. South Sudan's focus on increasing crude oil production has been hard hit by the coronavirus pandemic. The virus spread has derailed all plans and dashed the hopes of economic revival. The world's youngest nation's oil production dipped by 20,000 barrels per day due to the outbreak. It also had to postpone scheduled bidding and licensing of 14 oil blocks. And finally, in Botswana, preliminary tests to establish the reason behind the mysterious deaths of hundreds of elephants point to a naturally occurring toxin. Wildlife officials have been struggling to find out the cause of the deaths more than 2 months after the first carcasses were spotted on the Okavango region. Initial investigations appeared to rule out common causes like poaching and anthrax. Those were your news making headlines this hour. Well, to Europe now, where the Eurozone's economy recorded its deepest contraction on record in the second quarter. That's according to preliminary estimates released on Friday. The bloc's second quarter GDP shrank a devastating 12.1% from the previous quarter, slightly more than expected. The decline was the deepest fall since 1995. Spain posted the worst output slump, with its economy shriveling by 18.5%. That was worse than expected and wiped out all of the country's post-financial crisis recovery of the last 6 years. GDP in Italy and France also tumbled sharply, but less than expected, by 12.4% and 13.8% respectively. Germany, the largest economy in the bloc, saw a 10.1% contraction in the second quarter. Elsewhere, car makers have been badly hit by the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. However, as factories resume production and consumption recovers in China, production has been improving in the world's auto factories. With more on that story, here's our correspondent, Lucy Ho.
VW says 2020 has so far been one of the most challenging periods in its history. This plant in Zwickau was forced to stop production completely for 6 weeks as demand dropped off a cliff and global sales plummeted. The company has posted a 23% drop in sales and a loss of nearly $1 billion in the first half of this year, down from a profit of $10 billion in 2019. But as production resumes, VW says there's been a gradual recovery and it hopes to be back in the black by the end of this year.
Honestly, from the first day of the lockdown, we start thinking about how is it when we come back. Right now, we are more or less in 100% in good shape, so we are producing cars every day, roughly 300, and after the summer break we will go up to 700 cars and then later up to 1,500.
But it's not all bad news. Operations in China managed to increase year on year in the second quarter as the market there improved. And VW hopes exposure to the Chinese market will keep sales afloat over the course of the rest of this year. Porsche, VW's luxury sports car maker, has also posted a profit in the second quarter. The company says it won't have to step up its cost-cutting measures beyond what's already been announced, but there's no doubt that VW has been hit hard as it hopes to emerge from the coronavirus pandemic. Lucy Hoff, CGTN, Zwickau.
Shifting to the UK now, London's hospitality sector is gradually resuming business as the coronavirus controls ease. Nonetheless, it's still a question of whether the hotels can make a profit this year, as CGTN's Andrew Wilson now explores.
England's hotels are slowly waking up after a troubled and unwanted lockdown sleep.
Just want to go over the procedures, obviously, that we're going to start putting.
Near Heathrow Airport, the 400-room St Giles Hotel is finalising arrangements, keen to put the pandemic into the past.
Everyone was coming with a really nice smile on their faces, and now it looks like a really ghost town. It's empty. We really need the customers to come back and bring the joy with them.
Obviously, I did a lot of brainstorming as to the sort of things that we need to take out of bedrooms as well, put into bedrooms.
It's up to hotel manager Charlie Islam Harry to make sure they're ready and compliant. Housekeeping is the COVID-ready front line. Cleanliness is scrupulous. Only essential items remain in rooms, all but cleared in a deep clean for the guests.
The practicalities are actually quite straightforward, turning a 200-cover restaurant into 114 for social distancing, or replacing the breakfast bar with a la carte or a grab-and-go option. No, the real issue is confidence, making people feel safe again to travel and stay away from home. The battle, it seems, for hospitality is going to be psychological rather than a matter of logistics.
And that's the real challenge, getting the guests back.
If people are confident and happy to fly, then I know personally I'd be happy to fly now if it's safe to do so, to be able to just bring the hospitality industry back to where it used to be, you know. We rely on people coming into the UK, you know, tourism, visiting places, staying in our hotels. So, yeah, it's just, you know, please get on a plane.
The UK hospitality industry is worth billions to the economy. It's also one of the most diverse, and while quiet coastal properties are filling up, big cities are struggling.
So it really is a very mixed bag in terms of operation style, size of business, type of business, location, and what clientele they cater for. But overall, with social distancing in place, we know that many of our businesses are going to struggle to be operating at a profit before the end of the year.
International travel will clearly be key. London is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world, but it has to be safe to make the journey, and the must-see visits need to open again. Andrew Wilson, CGTN, London.
China's long-awaited BeiDou 3 navigation satellite system is now open for business. Chinese President Xi Jinping officially commissioned the system on a Friday during a ceremony at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing.
This is the moment Chinese engineers have been waiting for nearly 30 years.
I declare the BeiDou 3 global navigation satellite system is officially launched.
The 30th BeiDou 3 satellite, the last of the series, was launched on June 23rd. It completed the country's domestically developed navigation satellite constellation. The mission of the team now shifts to maintaining a sound and reliable operation during the satellite's service life of 10 to 12 years.
The launch ceremony means an important promise from the BeiDou system. We will provide global users with continuous and stable service. I am very proud to take part in this project.
China began to construct its navigation system named after the Big Dipper in the 1990s. BeiDou 1 was completed and put into operation in the year 2000, covering China and several neighboring countries. By 2012, BeiDou 2 had superseded the first generation with 14 satellites serving much of Asia and Oceania. But BeiDou 3, which has 30 satellites in 3 different orbits, expands its regional navigation system into a global network. So far, the BeiDou system has been widely used in transportation, agriculture, forestry, fishery, hydrological monitoring, meteorological forecasts, and even disaster relief. And a senior official says there's an even more ambitious target.
Building a more general, smarter, more integrated state-level positioning, navigation and timing system by 2035, which can be used from deep space to the bottom of the ocean, from outdoor environments to indoor environments.
The BeiDou system boasts high-precision service at the meter, decimeter and centimeter levels. China's Big Dipper is expected to serve the world and mankind with stronger functions and better performance. Nicole Ng, CGTN.
And like the game fair in Shanghai, the recently concluded Comic-Con in San Diego moved everything online due to the outbreak. How did that happen? And did it work without anyone attending in person? Mark New has a story.
This is last year's San Diego Comic-Con, and this is Comic-Con today.
I like to call him my left hand.
For the first time in its 50-year history, the world's largest pop culture event was forced entirely online by the coronavirus pandemic, giving it the name Comic-Con at Home.
I think they put an awful lot of great programming out there, and I was looking at the YouTube traffic on some of the videos, and I think that they managed to get the Comic-Con experience out to a lot more people than might have otherwise been the case.
Put it up there. Comic-Con put all virtual sessions online for free, and some blockbuster stars did appear, like Keanu Reeves revisiting his movie Constantine and promoting his upcoming film Bill and Ted Face the Music.
We have a destiny to fulfill.
There's nothing like, I can't feel or laugh or do anything like the way that working on Bill and Ted does.
Fans no longer had to wait in long lines or choose between panels happening at the same time. Instead, they could just click on any session, like Super Asian America, which highlighted the struggles of Asian American artists.
Jason Scott Lee, 99. Moving back to Hawaii, Pete. I'm building a house. Come help me build it. I'm quit. There's too much racism in Hollywood. Yuji Okamoto, Chosen from Karate Kid 2. I give up. It's done. Even as an Asian, especially as a Japanese American, does no work. I'm done. I'm moving to Seattle, open up a Hawaiian restaurant. All these guys are my mentors. I said, I'm just gonna stick this out.
Lost was the estimated $165 million Comic-Con typically pumps into the San Diego economy each year. Artists, comic book sellers, and designers also lost out. Notably missing from the event were big superhero or sci-fi promotions from the likes of Disney or Warner Brothers. But perhaps what was missed most was the opportunity for fans to come together and display what they call their inner geekness.
The cosplayers, they're all dressed up with nowhere to go. But what Comic-Con last week showed us is that even despite the circumstances, there's still a huge appetite for fans and people who want to show their love to these properties. They're going to take whatever opportunity people give to express their fandom.
Salkowitz says the nonprofit Comic-Con convention has saved up tens of millions of dollars from previous years, sort of like a rainy day fund. So fans are hoping that Comic-Con will have enough power to weather this storm and return to glory someday again. Mark New reporting for CGTN, Sunnyvale, California.
Time now for a look at commodity prices. Oil crawled back slightly today from the dismal performance it's been having. It was boosted primarily by a weaker dollar. Brent crude was up 0.5%. Gold continuing its stellar rally. It was up almost 8%. Platinum followed suit, gaining 0.8%. Copper, however, followed much of today's negative market sentiment. It was down 0.7%. And that was a quick look at today's commodities trade. Let's now take a look at what's coming up after the break. Nigerian diaper producer struggles to stay in business amid a dollar shortage.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Lagos-based diaper and sanitary towel manufacturer Wemi's product is almost at the end of its rope. Since the onset of the pandemic, Wemi has struggled to keep its workers employed. They provided protective wear and put in place safety measures to keep people healthy. But now, as the outbreak rages on, the manufacturer may not be able to stay afloat as it relies heavily on imported raw material. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has that story.
For the last 4 decades, Wemi Industries has been manufacturing and distributing hygiene products in Nigeria. Based in the nation's commercial capital, Lagos, the manufacturer provides employment for hundreds of women. Since the coronavirus pandemic hit, the sanitary products company has been struck by a dollar shortage that has choked import-dependent businesses.
The dollar has been very challenging, so we've had to consider going to the para market and also get the little we can get from the official market, get some from the Paramount and blend it to help with our operation. But in spite of that, it's been very difficult.
The shortage in the money market in Nigeria, which relies on imports for consumption, worsened after the coronavirus pandemic caused the crash in oil prices, the country's main export. This slashed government revenues and weakened the naira on the black market, where many companies source dollars. For Wemi and its clients, this is a major hiccup.
It means that we have to squeeze harder, increase our prices, and it slows down business basically, in effect. So we're likely not to have enough goods in stock at some point because of the reorder cycles that we have.
The company needs dollars to import around 80% of materials used to manufacture goods, ranging from nappies to sanitary towels. And now they're having to think outside the box to keep up with production goals.
It helps us to be creative, look for ways to get the same products locally. And we are now focusing on looking for any little local manufacturer that can kind of replicate what we import. But it's very difficult. But we're finding some small opportunities here and there and taking advantage of it, yeah.
Nigeria plans to unify its multiple exchange rates over the next 12 months, ending a policy used to manage pressure on the naira, which has caused dollar shortages. The central bank has rationed forex sale for imports and loan repayments, but it is yet to resume sale to investors to repatriate funds as reserves dropped 19% from last year. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Our final look at the markets today is how currencies didn't trade. Overall, it was not a good day for emerging market currencies. South Africa's rand losing those gains it had made this week and now trading at almost 17 rands to the dollar. That was a loss of more than 1% in value. Nigeria's naira also took a hit. The naira now trading at 388.76 to the dollar. And that was how currencies we track here did in trade today. Well, that's it from us here at Global Business. Remember that you can send your feedback on the screen, on the contacts that are on the screen, and do remember to follow us on digital media platforms. From me, Hannah Viviers, and the rest of the Global Business team, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next time.